I think a lot of people agree the path that Canadian government has taken, especially if you're conservative, is not a very good one. It feels like we're on the Titanic. We can see the iceberg, and nobody's turning the ship.
We should not be afraid of risk. We should not be afraid of change, especially when it is to such a benefit to the family that you're trying to protect. Things cannot stay the same. Things will not stay the same in Canada. They're only going to get worse. And so we do need to take a big, bold risk for the benefits of our children, our grandchildren, and the future of our Alberta nation.
If Alberta was already separate on its own, sovereign country, and Canada came along and said, "Hey, I'm going to offer you a deal. We're going to take care of all your finances. We're going to take your taxes. We're going to give you back 50 cents on the dollar. We're going to block your prosperity. You can't build pipelines without our permission. We're not going to take care of your vets or elderly. And we're going to make sure that the indoctrination and the programs in the school are not stuff that you agree with. Would you like to sign?" And everybody would say, "No, absolutely not." Well, that's still
Yeah.
the environment that we're dealing with here. And this is one of the things that when you ask them that question, like, would you sign? Would you join Canada under those kind of conditions? And immediately their common sense kicks in and says, "Well, no, absolutely not." Well, then why are you still in it?
When you are given the perception that this is this great nation, but then you see how your government is treating you and restricting you and censoring you, your eyes, if you're willing to open them, will stay open.
Thank you so much, Jason and Paula, for joining us today. And I guess as a couple, it's great to have another couple that is speaking up about Alberta independence. And first of all, we always ask our guests, and I'm sure a lot of people do know, but if they don't, where's the best place to find you?
It would be the levineshow.com where we list all of our platforms, and that's our socials and our live platforms and our podcast as well, along with any events that we may be doing at that time. And our documentary, which is the shot, Sean Hartman's story. You can find all of that at the levineshow.com.
Perfect. And that is all linked down below. So go follow and check it out if you don't follow them yet, please.
Well, and I'll say one thing. This is one of the main shows I get a lot of my information from, especially when I'm pressed on time. So beginning of the day, end of the day, I'm on X and watching a few shows. Your show happens to be one of the shows I watch on a regular basis. So it's been a big help for me gathering information as well.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
for that, Guy. That was kind of the purpose. We wanted to be bright early in the morning so we could get back to our day. We homeschool and raise our children and do a homestead. So we wanted to get back to our day. We also wanted to make it available for people to do it on their drive, during their
Mhm.
morning coffee. And if they don't catch it in the morning, any time throughout the day, they can pop it on and catch up on what we're talking about.
Perfect. And if people don't know, just tell us a quick 3,000-foot overview about yourselves, either together or individually as well.
Go ahead, my lovely bride.
Yeah, well, I always start with like we fled Ontario back in 2021 to come to Alberta, and we came here to homestead, have a nice simple life. And then, as Jason says, that then February 2022 came out with the convoy, and we were very inspired on seeing the truth and what wasn't shown on our mainstream media, which is where we'd always religiously turned to try and get that information from, and it was really eye-opening. And then through the course of time, Jason wanted to be online to try and share this information out, and as time progressed, I joined him, and as we were celebrating our 150th episode together for the Tea and Coffee with Paula and Jay today, it's been quite the journey, but it's primarily to discover truth and to have it shared out with our fellow man, quite honestly.
We met in a club in Toronto.
Mhm.
I call the place called the Docks. It turned into the Sound Academy later for those who know the area. And she was dancing there, looking gorgeous, but she was sweating. So I thought, hey, maybe I should give her a bottle of water. So I gave her a bottle of water. And then that's kind of how we met. And we've been together basically ever since,
Mhm.
20 plus years. And yeah, we just celebrated our 150th episode together because we have these conversations
Mhm.
around the table in the morning when I was doing my show. And I'm always intrigued about what she has to say and her perspective. And I thought this could be something I'd watch. So let's get her on the screen, and here we go.
And congrats on the 150 episodes as well.
Well, and congrats on the 20 years. Wow. I feel like there's a lot of parallels between your story and our story because we met at a bar that I used to work at. I was the bouncer and she used to come in and eventually we ended up talking, started going out. And then again, during that convoy, I think like a lot of content creators, we were inspired as well. And that's when we started doing a lot of the freedom causes and trying to stand up and push back against the government. So
Definitely a lot of
Yeah.
parallels. And also my wife, she's an immigrant to Canada. So it's always good for the party story of like, where is she from? If you can try and figure it out from her accent, kudos to you. But she's Nigerian born, Lebanese blood, and a wonderful person to add to our family. And I'm glad to say we've got two lovely little children
Hmm.
who are growing up fast, and one of them's
Yeah.
almost taller than her now. So those years are going by quickly.
Yeah, time flies.
maybe I'll ask you really quick because I'm always interested in people's political journey. How did they come to where they're at today, whether they're conservative, libertarian, even liberal? I'm very interested in, did they start there and they just remain there, or was there a journey over time?
For me, I was always conservative because at a very early age, I had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in me, hard worker. I liked to earn my way through life. Left the home at 17 and started life nice and early. And when you have that kind of mindset, you earn your way through things. You don't want it to be gone or taken from you. So that's part of where the conservative mindset from myself came from, because I wanted to provide for myself and then eventually my family. And my conservative mindset comes from ensuring that I have that freedom to do that and something to pass on, and nobody's going to try and take it from me. And then Paula, a little bit different origin story for her on this one.
Yes, certainly. I think I certainly grew up more liberal minded and leading. And then I grew up, started working, started paying taxes, and I quickly shifted to a more conservative mindset. Like all when your parents used to tell you, turn off the lights, when you leave a room, when we have bills to pay. Or when you grow up and you start paying those bills and you start wondering, where does my tax money go and why aren't these services as I would expect? So that started transitioning me, and I would say in my mid 20s when I emigrated to Canada with my parents, and I started, yeah, working and paying for things. I'm like, huh. And then, yeah, I started becoming more conservative minded in that respect. And then when got married, had children, wanted to build a life, plan a life for our family, I think that shifted me even more into the conservative mindset. And now I'm certainly more freedom based, I would say as well.
Yeah, I would say definitely in modern conservatism, there's this real string of populism or open thought really starting to come into the space. And I definitely see it in your conversations, whether it's your think tank conversations, guest appearances, or on your show. And I think it's been really good for conservatism overall as well.
Thank you very much for
Yeah.
that, Guy. I really appreciate that. And we're just being ourselves. But what you're seeing on the screen is not a character. If you meet us in person, we are as silly and goofy as we sound on the screen. We do have deep conversations, and we
Mhm.
also have some strong opinions. So that makes
Yeah.
for good conversations in the car rides as we're traveling from event to
Mhm.
event, or even with our children because we
Yeah.
homeschool. So they're always learning what's going on as they're observing these kind of things. But yeah, and sometimes we can have some rocky roads. There's a lot of
Yeah.
gravel out here in Alberta, so it happens. But we make our way through it, and after 20 years, I think we know each other quite well,
Mhm.
and we even know how to push buttons. We've learned how to do that as well.
Yeah.
Same here, essentially. But you've also become a prominent voice now within Alberta and the conversation around Alberta. But what have been the surprises or challenges, I guess, in building that audience within Alberta specifically?
Some of the challenges and surprises there is when you start off by doing like a commentary of Canada, coast to coast. We even had a show that we would go from the East Coast all the way across Canada, interviewing people
Mhm.
and having conversations all at one go. We called that the relay. Going from that to focusing on Alberta, one of the challenges was you'll lose a good chunk of your audience because a good chunk of your audience actually wants the Canada to stay together, and they
Mhm.
see you as a threat to that, especially in the circles that we were talking to a lot, which was the freedom circles, which was waving the Canadian flag, going out to Ottawa, doing their best to continue to keep Canada together. And then here we are. We're now talking about
Mm.
participating in ending that dream that they've been fighting for so long on. So that was a bit of a wake up as well for all of us to understand that we had a lot of really close followers and audience that did not align with that. Some of them still watch us,
Mm.
but some of them absolutely let their views be known, and they weren't interested in participating in what they call separatists, even though I like to call ourselves sovereignist. But I think at the end of the day, we're still all neighbors, and I think we're going to get along just fine long term. So a bit of a bump in the road on that one.
Well, maybe they'll come back around. I know I'm trying to start a national conversation. I mean, I'm just one small content creator, but I'm reaching out to national conservatives in other provinces across Canada as well. And when I first started reaching out and when I was really focused in on national content creators, they wouldn't touch the issue at all because they didn't want to fracture their audience. That was obvious. But I've noticed especially over the last 3 or 4 weeks, they're starting to talk about it a lot more, and they're not talking about it in a negative way. They're talking about it and they're doing honest, fair reporting. Some of them are even, I think, indicating they may eventually come around to independence because the first principles are so aligned. What do you think the odds are of a larger conservative audience across Canada possibly supporting Alberta independence or coming around to the idea as it picks up over the next 6 months?
Well, there's 8.5 million Canadians who actually believe that Alberta should separate, and that's from a CBC poll where they said 80% doesn't want separation. That leaves 20% that does. That's 8.5 million Canadians. That means millions of Canadians outside of Alberta already support it. And it's one of these conversations as the more you learn, the more you know, the more you understand
Yeah.
why it makes sense. And as Bruce Party puts out there, this could be a way to fix Canada. Because I think a lot of people agree the path that Canadian government has taken, especially if you're conservative, is not a very good one. It feels like we're on the Titanic. We can see the iceberg, and nobody's turning the ship. But this could be one way to wake up a lot more conservatives. Maybe the Conservative Party will pay more attention to some of these grievances and assist the rest of Canada after Alberta makes its decision in October.
I mean, I would love to see that too, but do not underestimate the power of the legacy media. And they are the ones that have been keeping the narrative going with regards to calling us separatists. They're also the ones deceiving the public who still tune into them. And so that's really been difficult in getting the message out, getting the awareness out, and getting the truth out. So I would love to see more Canadian wide growing podcasters speaking more about this to have an open conversation of it's not just affecting Alberta and what could be the positives for the rest of the country. We'd love to see that conversation had as well.
Absolutely. And I was going to kind of bring this up a little bit later, but maybe I'll ask now because I've kind of changed my view on this narrative when I first gave the analysis. And it was this entire Russia collusion thing that they're trying to bring up. What were your views on this? And what do you think the point of that was?
Well, the first thing we did is we went to go check their PO box for our check because we haven't seen one yet. So I'm not sure where this is coming from. But I do understand why they're pulling that because it's been successful-ish in the past of distracting people. But I think it's a really weird one for them to pull because when they did that against Trump, the two main times, he still won the presidency. And I think what they're doing is they're harming their own credibility. When people hear that and they look into it, and you have the RCMP saying, no, there is no collusion when it comes to that. You got the Alberta government echoing that message as well. They're just harming themselves. They're kind of exposing themselves that they're getting very desperate. And Nat and the guy, one of the things that I'm still missing is why should we stay? When Quebec was doing their referendum, Canada basically embraced Canada or Quebec with love and said, "Don't leave. We love you. We want to work with you. We want to make this work." We're not getting the same type of
Mm-mm.
attitude and response here. So I'm still waiting for it. There's a stage to stop where they're like in denial, like this can't happen. To now, like, oh, acceptance, like, oh, this can happen. Maybe we should take a different approach. We were not there yet, and I don't have a good argument to stay in Canada as an Albertan at this stage.
Yeah, still waiting for that.
Yeah, and that's the analysis I initially had, and then I'm like, this is kind of retarded. They keep coming with the same talking point. This is the fourth iteration that I've noticed in the news cycles. First, it was Trump collusion, then it was U.S. foreign interference, now it's Russian foreign interference, and the cycle only seems to last about 48 hours. It's real short. I think there might be a secondary purpose, and it's not to convince voters, but it's to say, stay with inside the bubble, inside of the bubble, inside of the bubble, meaning keep the conversation inside Canada, keep it inside of Alberta, and keep it inside of conservative circles inside of Alberta. And if you take the conversation outside of those circles, you better believe we're going to claim foreign interference and all kinds of other things. I think it's one of their strategies to try to silo the conversation, and they don't want to run an entire news cycle on it. They just want to poke the content creators and the supporters of Alberta independence to say, keep the conversation inside of Alberta. Maybe that's kind of what I got from it.
I think it's that bag of tricks that they resort to. And I think the first exposure I received of it was during the convoy, when mainstream media was saying, look, these horrible people, and there's hardly anyone there. But we would see the boots on the ground, the Viva Fries walking around saying, no, look at this. It's all happiness, bouncy castles, and collectiveness together. And I think we're seeing that with Russia, the Russiagate. They're using buzzwords, old tricks in order to try and bring, I don't know, bad memories, associations for the public. And again, keep it inside. We know what this is. It's going to be bad for us. Let's not pay any attention to it, or let's just, heads down and go Canada, go. I think it's just a bag of tricks, and they're running out of new ones because the public are aware, and there's such mistrust that, quite honestly, if the media is telling you something, and we spoke about it this morning on the show with the alien awareness. I said, look, the left hand is trying to distract you. What is the right hand doing? And I think that's really the case now.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the Mitch Sylvester alien video to come out where he's walking on the moon during one of the moon landings. Pointing to him. Obviously, he's from another dimension. I'm just waiting for those videos. But to be a little bit more serious, I kind of disagree a little bit with Paula that they're running out of their bag of tricks. I think this is just the beginning. I think they're going to be going through people's divorce records and going through their history and their work records and say, oh, well, this guy was fired. Why was he fired? Oh, because he made an off-color joke or something. Like, I think they're going to dig a little bit deeper because they're not trying to win support through positive messaging. They're going to try and take out every single one of them. And that's why I think it's really important many people step up and grab a microphone. If we only had a few and they can discredit or take
Yeah.
down a couple of channels and then that's it for the messaging, then we'd be in a lot of trouble. So that's why I think shows like yours, who's popping up and having conversations, because it's going to be a lot tougher to stop these conversations if there's dozens of us versus just a few.
Yeah, I
And also
definitely
we're
agree.
outside. So I mean, I hope it, and that was one of the strategic reasons why we did leave Canada at that point, because we said we want to continue to speak up, and we're only seeing censorship closing further in and further in on us, and we won't be able to do what we want to do or say what we want to say. Not that Mexico is ideal for that right now, but at least they're not focusing on the conversation in Canada. They're not going to censor us because we're talking about Alberta. But if we had stayed, and for example, if we were still in Vancouver talking about this, I'm sure they'd use their mechanisms as well that are coming, and we're already seeing them coming as well.
What do you think some of the big hurdles are going to be coming up over the next 6 months? And how do you think we can maybe address those hurdles?
Well, there's going to be more and more people step up to have the conversation to keep us together, and they're going to use unity and talk about that. We're going to see people like Stockwell Day come out and speak more against it. Stephen Harper, Jason Kenney, some conservatives that people really looked up to, Preston Manning. They're all going to kind of have the same type of messaging, which is it's going to be so tough. It's going to take you a long time. You're never going to get her done. In fact, Jason Kenney just put a post out saying exactly that. He said, well, you're not going to get to your 50%, but if you do, it's going to be impossible to leave anyways. That kind of rhetoric is something that we're going to have more conversations about. Explain the Clarity Act, explain the Supreme Court decision, explain the actual Constitution. It does not block a province from leaving. Other constitutions around the world do explicitly block the provinces from breaking up or states from breaking up. Ours does not. The door is open. You just have to get there through a democratic process, which is a referendum, and do it peacefully, legally, and honestly. I think we're just going to have to keep putting out these little fires as we go along. But the biggest challenge is going to be having the conversations in the cities. And this is something I've really admired from your show, is you're identifying a new strategy is needed in order to get into the cities and have conversations. Because there's a tremendous amount of support outside the cities. It's going to be won and lost, I think, in the streets of Edmonton and Calgary.
Uh,
And before we continue to move on to more the strategy part, I did want to ask you initially, both of you, but also as a couple, what tipped the scales for you to consider Alberta independence or sovereignty and actually make you move towards that? What was that policy, or was it a bunch of different things, or just one moment that you can pinpoint?
I had my moment, but let's go ahead and have Paula answer that one first, and then I'll share mine.
Yeah, it was basically a collection of things, but just seeing the way the federal government was enforcing their decisions and their will on the country, I wasn't a fan of. And then the more I got to speak with older Albertans who have been saying, like, there's one particular lady who says, like, from the time I was 11, I've been wanting to separate, and she's in her late 60s. So it's not a new thing for people who were born and raised here, and it made me start thinking, well, why? Because I came to I look, I'm an immigrant. I came to Canada. I'm a proud Canadian, and then I moved to Alberta, and I was like, I'm a proud Albertan first, and then a Canadian second. Like, it really is different out here. And then when you start seeing the way the province and the people are being treated, and the whole conversation of dirty oil, yet they're quite happy to accept their equalization checks. It's for me, it was just really a collection of things. The more time spending in Alberta, the more I realized, no, they deserve a lot better than the way they're being treated currently.
And for me, it was the federal election. So April 25th,
Mm,
2025 was when I was certain this is not going to work. I spent an entire campaign, spent a couple of years before then getting myself into position to run
mhm,
as an MP. I wasn't disappointed that I lost as an MP, but what I was disappointed of is all the hope that I saw in Alberta that all we got to do is vote for Pierre and then you're going to get it in and everything's going to be fixed and everything's going to be great. But then I saw the rest of Canada disagree with that. The polls were bang on. They were calling for a liberal minority, possibly
mhm.
majority. And as I was door knocking and talking to people all over during my campaign, they had this spirit of them that, like, this is the last chance. Like, if the Liberals get in again, there's no hope for us. Canada doesn't care, and the election's over before it leaves Ontario anyways. So the results of that election really said it all to me. It was a two-party system. The third parties, whether you were NDP, Green, BBC, Bloc, whatever you were, all lost support at that election, and the two big main parties gained a ton of support. And at that point, is there's no breaking out of that. Canada has their say, especially over in the east. They wanted the Liberal government to continue to do what the Liberal government was promising, which is to fight against the U.S., elbows up, and all of these messages were just not in line with Alberta. So that's the night that I made the decision. I'm all in for Alberta independence, and that's because I had 3 conversations the night I lost the election. The first one with Jeffrey Rath, who
Mhm.
read to me his letter to Alberta. So his letter to Alberta came out the next day, but he read it to me, and I was inspired by that. The next conversation was with Mitch Sylvester, who said they were getting 4,000 new signups every single hour since the election results came out. So he was extremely excited.
Mm.
The APP just kind of just blossomed again. And then the last message I got was from Premier Danielle Smith, who said, "Pay attention. We're going to have a press release tomorrow." And that's where she announced her election reform to lower the requirement
Mhm.
to have a referendum, open up some of the door to get this to happen, tighten up the security of the election by removing electronic voting machines, requiring ID, etc. So I went to bed very optimistic that night, even though I lost. I thought, okay, we're on a new path. Everybody's going to get behind this, and I was very inspired from that point on.
And on your perspectives on Canada, both as a Canadian, but also as an immigrant, because you have two different stories there and probably two different perspectives that from where you started to where you are now wanting to separate. So what was that change also of seeing Canada differently, or maybe seeing it for what it actually is or for what it shouldn't be? There's different ways to look at it.
Well, I think I, like a lot of natural born Canadians, had the rose tinted nostalgia glasses on. I arrived in Canada with the idea this is going to be my new world. I came from a developing country. Obviously, I spent a lot of time in England, but this was going to be my home, my future. And isn't this country great? And on the surface, yes, it is. It's a Western country. The passport has value when it comes to traveling. There's so many doors can be opened for you. But as you spend more time and again, start paying your taxes and you start working and you start living and you start buying your groceries. I always tell the story of when I first arrived in Canada, you could buy ground beef for 1.99 a pound. And now, what is it? 7.99, 8.99 a pound, depending on where you go. Like, that's incredible. And ground beef is, for us carnivores out there, the staples of feeding your family. And so I got to see a lot of change when you actually live and you work here. And it is disappointing. Okay, there's no utopia, there's no such thing. But when you are given the perception that this is this great nation, but now you see how your government is treating you and restricting you and censoring you, your eyes, if you're willing to open them, will stay open.
And then for my family, the Levines and my mother's side as well goes back to the 1600s. So our first ancestor came to Quebec City in 1667, before there was a Montreal, and it was a cobbler, but he was also a soldier. So our blood for the Levines is to fight and build and create, even when there's not much there. And 200 years later, Canada became a country, and now 150 years or so later, we're now at another crossroads. Where what I would love to see is Canada that I grew up in and I believed we were living in to actually be true, so that same thing could be there for my children. But absolutely, since Trudeau Senior, if you go through the history, that's where a major shift for Canada happened, and Trudeau Junior made it very clear that we're going to be the first postmodern country with no identity. Uh, I thought for sure it's time for some of these provinces to mature up and do their own thing. At one
Mhm.
point, it made sense because we're a young, growing country. But just like a family, at a certain age, your children should leave the nest and do their
Yeah.
own thing. And I think many provinces have now reached that level where they're considering that. We don't need mommy and daddy from
Yeah.
Montreal and Ottawa to take care of us anymore. We can do our own thing and still be a prosperous neighbor to the rest of.
Well, it's very interesting to hear, especially, I mean, your story is good as well, Jason, but now that we've been doing these interviews and this question seems to come up, what made you go from believing in national Canada to independence? We've talked to, I mean, Nat's an immigrant as well. Paula's an immigrant. We've talked to Max from Freedom Calendar. His story was very interesting on how he came around to being a very fervent independence supporter. Igor's story is very interesting as well. I think there's a real opportunity to shift the immigrant community. We've seen it happen with Trump. Citizens that could vote very often will vote for what they wanted and what they thought the country was going to be, not where it's at today.
And exactly with Paula, as an immigrant, I say that all the time too. I resonate so much with what you said because what you're sold about Canada outside, even to this day, even to today, is very different than the reality on the ground. And I think they've done a pretty good job marketing themselves outside and to countries outside of what their own Canadian citizens. But when people do go and have to live there, they do, and we all do realize what's going on. And if you don't, then you continue to be miserable without understanding why you're not getting what you were given on the pamphlet, essentially.
Yeah, and then the immigration process to me seems that it's changed dramatically since when I first came here, because we came here with terms and conditions, we had to fill out reports, and there were hurdles to go through, jump over, and that was absolutely fine. That's expected. That's the immigration process. Most nations have strict guidelines that you need to follow. But now it seems not only have they opened the floodgates, they've taken the floodgates and thrown them out, and it's just open waters to come into Canada. And I think for anyone who's been through the immigration process legally, it's incredibly disappointing because of what we had to go through. And I think there are a lot of immigrants who were like, "No, I had to work hard to come here. I'm a proud Canadian. Why are things all of a sudden changed now? There are so many people coming in, and it does seem, and obviously it affects us economically as well. So I think there's a lot of staunch immigrants who've been here, like myself, for 20 plus years, who are like, this isn't what the country I came for, and we've seen it change before our eyes. It's disappointing.
And some of the more compelling conversations I've witnessed or been part of is with people who've left and fled other
Mhm.
countries. And they come here and they say, "Hey guys, you know what's going on here? We've seen this before." They start by shutting down this, taking away your guns, stopping you from
Yeah.
talking. You can't even rally or protest anymore. These are all steps towards a very socialist government, and it doesn't end well. It never did. That's
No,
why
they left.
I,
Mhm.
insert name, left the country, insert name, to come to Canada for freedom. So they've seen this happen before their eyes in their own generation. Like Pastor Arthur Pulowski is a good example. he'll explain to you how they had to flee this. And now he's watching Canada go down the exact same path that caused the conditions that he had to flee. And he's one of many
Yeah.
people. There's a lot of videos from the convoy itself where there's immigrants who came to Canada for a better life saying, you guys need to pay attention. Things are going really bad here. And a lot of us have been paying attention to the messages they've been sharing.
Well, and I do want to get into the conversation about Edmonton and Calgary, and I kind of want to get in depth. But before we do, we're going to be playing it tonight. I see, and you may have or may have not seen the clip of Jason Kenney talking about people that are supporting independence shouldn't be part of the UCP or Conservative Party because they're separatists. And I think that means we're directly over the mark, because the strategy is to pay the $10 membership fee to get into the UCP, to make sure Danielle Smith knows she doesn't have to side with independence or nationalism. She just has to let democracy go forward on October 19th. And the fact that Jason Kenney is putting a huge effort into putting the narrative out there is we don't belong within the UCP or the Conservative Party.
Well, I think he's a little jaded because the exact same people that he's talking
Yeah.
about there are the ones who took him out as a leader. So there was a big drive to go ahead and buy memberships, get there and have the vote for the leadership race, the leadership review for Jason Kenney, and he lost it. But he might be a little bit jaded because he understands the process. And if you listen really carefully to what he's saying, he's like, I'm not a fan of democracy. I don't think
Yeah.
democracy should happen. I should have exactly what I think should happen. That's the way this should be. And in fact, let's take the steps of removing democracy from people who want to vote and participate in a party and be part of the process. It's a really strange conversation to be hearing a conservative, well, at least in name, say out there. But really, what he's saying is he doesn't like how democracy works. And yes, Danielle Smith is very aware of how it works. That's how she got in. She wasn't voted in by the public initially. She
Mhm.
was brought in as somebody to replace Kenny after a leadership race and then won the general election. And conservatives in Alberta have a history of replacing their leader midterm if they're not doing a good job. In fact, Danielle Smith might be one of the more recent ones that finishes her term. Normally, if they're not doing a good job,
Yeah.
conservatives will get together and replace them. So he understands that he was replaced because of his changing position that was not aligned with his base when it came to the COVID mandates. And the same thing could happen with Danielle Smith with this particular issue. Now, I think she's a lot smarter than Kenny was, and she understands what the process is. And she's made it very clear, give me a new mandate and I will support it. So this referendum will be exactly that opportunity. Give her a new mandate, vote yes, and she'll support it.
What I definitely think she is in a good position as well, because she's really walked the line where Pierre Poilievre has completely kind of pigeonholed himself, where I don't know if he can unite people that are in favor of independence and normal conservatives. Danielle Smith is one of the few conservatives in the country in an interesting position where she's kind of been able to unite those two factions, so much so that memberships in the UCP are shooting up through the roof right now in Alberta.
Well, it's
Yeah.
a tough line to follow because you got the Federalist mandate, and what they're focused on is to be the Prime Minister of Canada.
Mm.
And Pierre Poilievre would be in a very disadvantaged situation if Alberta and the 34 or so MPs left the House. He would be fighting a different battle there, that's for sure. And when it comes to Danielle Smith, she's been very clear. I've asked her this question in public and in private. Um, she wasn't elected on separation. She wasn't elected on a mandate to remove Alberta from Canada. She was elected on a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. And if she's going to stay this strong, even when her party has shifted and the winds have shifted, you can stay this strong on the mandate that she was elected on. When the mandate is changed through an election, or like a referendum,
Mm.
she will be that strong as well. And that's what I'm counting on, and I'm looking forward to that. She'll be on the show in the next couple of weeks, so we'll dig into a lot more
Yeah.
details on this as soon as those numbers are validated by Elections Alberta after the court allows that process to continue, which is what I'm expecting to happen. She'll be joining us to talk about the next steps.
And what do you, I want to kind of go back to the conversation about Edmonton and Calgary and how we're going to kind of penetrate this bubble. One of the big worries I have about this, I know we want to have conversations in parks and throw little events and stuff like this. I worry a little bit that we may end up like Jehovah Witnesses on the corner handing out pamphlets that nobody wants to take, or those people in the blue vest trying to get you to donate on a monthly basis to charities where people just don't want to have conversations with us in the cities. And that's why I think the online spaces is hopefully where we can plant the seeds. So when people see us on the streets, they won't turn away. But what do you think the strategies might be, and what are the challenges going into Calgary and Edmonton?
Personally, I think what I would ask people to do is raise your flag. So go ahead and
Mm,
put your Alberta flag up, whether it's in your front window or on a pole in the wind. Put your Alberta flag up if that's what you support. Because when your neighbors are walking by, I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people going, "Oh, I didn't know they supported it. I supported it too." And they're going to take away the stigma of being on that path. Just seeing in your own neighborhood, that person supports it, that person supports it, will create
mhm,
more awareness. And courage is courageous. So when people start to come out and say, "Yeah, you know what? I voted for the removal of the equalization payment, but nothing happened." And Jason Kenney was just on a debate with Bruce Party where he said, "As premier, I couldn't get things done either." So maybe this isn't the path forward for the prosperity of
mm,
Alberta. And 60, almost 62% of Albertans wanted that gone, and they didn't get it. So if those
yeah.
same people, just that same people, come and say, "You know what? Let's finally get rid of this equalization plus all of the other barriers for prosperity," I think we'll be in good shape. And I assure you guys, even in the cities, there's a lot more people who are just keeping their head down, didn't sign, they didn't want to be part of a
Mhm.
list in case the government had some retaliation, they didn't want their neighbors to see it, but they do support it. So much like the Trump election, you're going to be surprised at the ballot results because people, when they're in private and they can check off one of those two boxes, I suspect a lot more are going to say yes than anybody's believing at this time.
And I don't think we should underestimate the curiosity that people have because, again, a lot of people are under the viewership of mainstream media. So when they all if they do encounter someone with a Alberta flag and, they're offering information, I've no doubt some people will stop and just ask them simple questions and get those wheels turning because they're going to question what they've been told on mainstream media. Those are the questions they're gonna come up with. What's gonna happen with my pension? What's gonna happen with the military? Do you think Trump's gonna invade? And a simple 5-minute conversation to put them at ease and actually give them the truth will probably set them along their way to maybe get more information themselves or share it or have conversations with others. But I really think curiosity will be there, and I don't think they're gonna be encountered by the mean old left that we see on the TV that, again, makes people scared to speak out or be afraid that they're gonna be canceled. I think when they're met with people that are gonna offering information, they'll stop and ask a question or 2 and then get on with their day, but at least they've left with some information that's the truth.
Well, and yeah, I was going to say also, having conversations in the cities and parks and things are very good, but possibly we could hit two birds with one stone. Now, it would have to be the right person in the right location and things like that with the right temperament as well. But we used to work with Billboard Chris. Now, I don't necessarily like his stance on Alberta independence, but he was very effective when it came to opening up dialogues. We used to film for him a little bit, and he was very even keeled, would just use facts, start conversations, film those conversations, and then those conversations would be engaged in online afterwards. So he would, in a day, maybe start 5 or 6 conversations, but online he would literally reach tens of thousands of people that would watch the dialogue.
Mhm.
And because he was even killed and he wasn't trying to have an "I got you" debate, I think it opened up a lot of minds that seen him online. Do you think a strategy like that could possibly work?
I think mastering social media is key, and we do long form interviews, as you know, like they can go for up to 2 hours to our supporters. But that is not the appetite that's presented today. So they want sound bites, they want 2 or 3 minute interviews. So I think mastering the methods of social media to get those tidbits of information out there is certainly key.
I also think Q and A's in the park will be good.
Mm.
So I think we're past the speeches phase at this point. Now it should open up the two ears and listen a little bit more to what people's concerns are and address them. Not quite like the whole change my mind type of
Mm.
position, which is you have to change my mind. It's we're here to listen. So what are your concerns? and let's have those conversations. And when we do them in a public space, somebody will come up and have a genuine question. And then you'll hear hecklers yelling, "Ah, traitor, traitor, NDP, unions, unions." And then people will see the kind of difference between the two options here. You have a group that's very angry and is yelling, but they're not talking, and they're the ones pushing to stay. And then you have another group which is wide open. Anybody can walk up to the mic. In fact, if you
Mm.
disagree, go to the front of the line and ask your question and not afraid to have the conversations. That's how we can also change quite a few minds, not just the ones at the mic, but the people who are watching all of this happen. Which side do you want to be on? You want to be on the side that's willing to listen and work and cooperate, or the one that wants to shut you down and not allow it to happen? I think even that image in the parks is going to help a lot. But people open their minds and dig deeper into what's going on there.
And I also think Charlie Kirk gave a blueprint, and a very useful blueprint, I think, to speak specifically to the youth and how to do it. And I know right now there's a lot of there's obvious arguments for Alberta to become independent, and we all know them, and we're able to almost list them off the top of our heads. But some of those arguments, be it economic or on the cultural side, that have worked more in the rural areas or with the more conservative minded people, might not be as effective with somebody that might be either on the fence or more towards a libertarian tendency, or straight up crazy crazy lefties. And I do think that there is a way to convince even the most radical of the left, if we can get the talking points that will effectively at least plant a seed in their heads, but they might not be the ones that we're used to. So I do think we need to start opening up and figuring out ways to appropriately communicate them for the language that they speak, and then being able to answer questions from there. But have you thought of any of those arguments that could be put in a different way that would hit a different either demographic or group of people, or even politically minded group of people?
Yeah, so we've had young people show up at our
Mhm.
events, and there's one that pops into my mind right away when you talk about that. And she said, "Hey, look, I'm for it, but my friends are not. My friends don't even want to listen to the arguments." And then she talked about how all their focus is right now is to try and find a job so they can leave their parents' basements. That's literally what she said.
Mm.
And I said to her, "Well, don't you hear what you're saying? They want to fight for personal sovereignty. They want to be away from their parents. They want to do their own things. They want to grow and have
Mhm.
a future on their personal sovereignty." Sadly, because of what's going on at the federal level, that's
Yeah.
their barrier. They don't have the same opportunities that we had. And then I remind her of one of the more important stats, which young people need to pay attention to. When we were younger, the
Mhm.
average age for the first time home buyer was 24. It's now 44. So that means it takes 22 years to raise your down payment before you can actually put down your down payment to get a house, where you would have been paid off with your mortgage around the
Yeah.
same age previously. So when they start to hear things like that and they're still at home trying to find a way to get out, then it starts to click. They're like, "Oh, it's because I don't have job opportunity and home prices are going up and the inflation is really changing the value of things. And because we have an influx of immigration, I can't compete." They start to put two and two together and figure out, wait a minute, you guys had the prosperity that we don't have. And one generation is all it took to get rid of it. So they start to understand that this is, a tough pill to swallow, but one way to fix that is to get out from the system that created those barriers for you.
Well, and I also often make the point, we need to plant seeds. We don't have to change a mind on the spot. And that's why I liked when you were talking about potentially it not having to change your mind, but having an open dialogue, because open dialogues, and if we film that in the park with a conversation in a table or something, can have a huge impact online as well. But one of the points to planting seeds is not necessarily to get somebody that's against independence to vote for independence. We have a secondary option as well. If we can plant seeds, as long as they don't go out to the polls that day because they're curious on, okay, well, let's see what happens. I'm not going to vote for it, but I'm not going to vote against it. That's one less vote actually voting against us. So technically, I think we have two options. In the best case scenario, we can change somebody's mind. But if we plant the right seeds, they might not be motivated to vote against independence at that point. Because when we look at the polling, it's almost 60% strongly against. If we can get that to 30% strongly against, and then a big group that's indifferent, I think that's a winning strategy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I also think we should recognize when there's minds that can't be changed. So there's going to be about 30% that are just a hard no, no matter what you tell them. And that's fine. That's their opinion. They're welcome to it. There's about 30% that's already for it. They're ready to vote right
Mhm.
now. It's going to be that other 40% where the attention needs to be placed. And another strategy that works quite well is ask them questions. So a question I sometimes ask the
Mhm.
audience is if Alberta was already separate on its own, sovereign country, and Canada came along and said, "Hey, I'm going to offer you a deal. We're going to take care of all your finances. We're going to take your taxes. We're going to give you back 50 cents on the dollar. We're going to block your prosperity. You can't build pipelines without our permission. We're not going to take care of your vets or elderly. And we're going to make sure that the indoctrination and the programs in the school are not stuff that you agree with. Would you like to sign?" And everybody would say, "No, absolutely not." Well, that's still
Yeah.
the environment that we're dealing with here. And this is one of the things that when you ask them that question, like, would you sign? Would you join Canada under those kind of conditions? And immediately their common sense kicks in and says, well, no, absolutely not. Well, then why are you still in it? Asking more questions of those groups, I think, has helped them with that planting of the seed and help it grow quickly too, because we got 5.5 months to get to
Yeah.
the decision before harvest is ready to go.
Exactly. And Paula, as I mean, women are 50%, maybe even more of the votes
Their
in
influence is higher than
Okay.
50%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, as specifically women, what can we do to connect to? Because we know women tend to move more towards the left and tend to vote more towards security or safety or the what they already know, and the fear of the unknown does get amplified a little bit more with women. I would say even it's a biological mechanism, but we're not going to get into that. But what do you think, and what strategies can be used for women specifically, and then specifically women in cities who will be might be very tough, but I think if we can get that seed planted, it might actually be easier to convince.
Well, I like what Kathy Flett is doing. She's going to women directly, she's going into their home, having conversations at the kitchen table. I certainly agree that I'm not a proponent of change, let alone major change, but I'll admit that being with this guy over here, there's been some of the biggest changes of my life. Lots of moving and I don't want to say risk taking, but lots of important decisions to be made for our future have been through the guide of my husband. I'm not going to disagree with that, and they've been beneficial for us. Men seem to have a foresight or be willing to take a risk and have that vision, and women do tend to be a little bit more conservative with regards to will it work out. We want like all the 101 scenarios planned out before we're really willing to make that jump. However, we should not be afraid of risk. We should not be afraid of change, especially when it is to such a benefit to the family that you're trying to protect. Things cannot stay the same. Things will not stay the same in Canada. They're only going to get worse. And so we do need to take a big, bold risk for the benefits of our children, our grandchildren, and the future of our Alberta nation. Have a conversation. I'll admit some women spend so much time online, so that is where we need to plant those seeds. We need to get that information out there and then be willing to have a one-on-one conversation. "Hey, let's go have a gathering together. Let's go sit in your living room with your friends, and let's have a conversation." And I love what Kathy is doing with her group to be willing to go to you, so it's nice and convenient, have those conversations, share that information, and give you the opportunity to be heard, ask your questions. We need to be more one-on-one hand-holding, dare I say, in order to get our minds changed, so effort needs to be put there.
And I think messaging is very important. I think one of
Mm,
the messagings we need to shift from is don't treat this like a divorce. That takes up negativity in your mind. And you're like, oh no, that means giving up and not fighting.
mm,
Don't talk about this as being a divorce from Canada. Talk about this as being a birth of a new nation. This is our opportunity to create something great. We don't know what it's going to look like. How's it going to grow up?
yeah,
What's it going to be in 20 years, 40 years, 50 years? It's a birth of something. And when you're honest about it, it's going to be some trauma to the baby and to the mother. There's going to be some challenges when the birth happens, but be excited about the future, not scared. Don't be insecure. Have confidence that it's going to turn out great. As long as you nurture it and be part of it and have your input and guide it, it's going to turn into something fantastic and fabulous. But maybe we should stop doing the whole this is a divorce from Canada because
mhm.
we feel abused and start talking about this is going to be the birth of a nation and you can be part of that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Jason Kenney did recently when he spoke about how like, even if you do get that far, look how difficult it's gonna be. Why are you trying to discourage people from challenges and in order to try and achieve something. And I think that just shows the mindset of be afraid, let your government lead you, and do as you're told, as opposed to think for yourself and plan for yourself.
Well,
I do think the framing around the birth of a nation and the opportunity to make history, that's what I've been telling, if there's any young people that do listen to us, that's what I've been trying to tell the youths, particularly. How often do you get an opportunity to be part of history and be part of an engaged citizenry that can actually craft a whole nation, the birth of a new nation, and you can be a part of it. You never got to do that within Canada. You never got to do that within the Americas. Even these things don't happen often. So you have that opportunity to be at the forefront of history in the history books.
But exciting time to
Absolutely.
be alive, right?
Yep.
well, even on our show, I used to refer it to as the referendum. And then one day, I don't know why I did it, but I said, this isn't a referendum. This is a vote for the founding of a nation. And it really hit myself, and it was my own words. But then I started using that this isn't a referendum, this is the founding of a nation we're voting for. And I think that's really impactful. I mean, if I can impact myself with it, it has to be impacting other people. And I think the federal government wants to refer to this as just another referendum and want to play it down. We really need to get the messaging out. This is the vote for the founding of a nation, and very few citizens on a global basis ever have this opportunity. So I think you nailed it right on. And I think over the last 2 months, we've transitioned our messaging when it comes to the referendum into the founding of a nation. And I hope other people start doing it as well. So
Yeah, because we certainly won't get it from mainstream media and from Ontario. I speak to people frequently in Ontario. Says, by the way, how's the messaging coming? Like, what are you hearing about Alberta? Nothing. It's just so dismissive with regards to what we're trying to achieve here, and it just shows the regard that they have for it.
But I also think that is part of the strategy, as we were saying at the beginning, of siloing the conversation to only within Alberta. And I think, in a way, not to critique it too much, because who am I to critique it too much? But initially, the movement was and we got it in our comments as well when we wanted to start talking about Alberta and supporting Alberta independence, that it should be a conversation that stays only within Alberta. Only Albertans can talk about it. It's for Albertans, by Albertans, and you shut up, don't mention it even. And I think that has played into the whole propagandist narrative from the mainstream media and the federal government. Oh, it's just a few conservatives over there. Don't even listen to them. Because in a way, we've kind of hindered the whole thing by saying nobody else can talk about it, which is why we continue to reach to more national and international. Again, I speak Spanish. I've been explaining Alberta independence in my Spanish show as well, and trying to demystify a lot of the things that come from even international mainstream media, conservative mainstream media outside of Alberta, saying still 51st state, or that it's a small minority and it will never happen. That's the messaging that's coming from conservative, independent news in Mexico. So I think it is important to be able to get that voice out, because we saw the effect during the Freedom Convoy, that internationally it became this huge thing. And the government, the federal government, and their actions also got questioned by the international community, and they didn't like it that much. But if we just let this thing stay within Alberta, we risk that whole, number one, censorship, but also the lack of perspective and support from the international community. So how can we tell the Albertans, only for Albertans and only by Albertans, that it's actually a useful thing to have the eyes of the world on it?
And I think the eyes of the world should be on Alberta,
Yeah.
because we might be able to forge a new path to independence that other places might want to follow and say, hey, you know what? They did it peacefully.
Mhm.
Not a single shot was fired. They did it at the ballot box. They did it through conversations. This is the modern way to have your independence. You don't need a 1776. You need a 2026. Go look at how Alberta did it. And I think that could be why you're going to see some pushback, even internationally, of, hey, don't listen to them. Because there's going to be some countries, even the US with Texas, where they're like, wait a minute, we don't want you guys to get those ideas either. But we could become a blueprint and a bit of a beacon for a lot of other places on how to get back to a republic style government, a true, honest, direct democracy that has accountability, and a prosperous one as well while you're at it. I think we might be able to create a new template here that I think a lot of places, even in Canada, should be taking a closer look at and maybe following in our footsteps in the near future.
Absolutely. And we recently, well, actually, I think it was yesterday, we interviewed Dallas Brody. We interviewed her on a lot of the adjacent topics that are affecting Alberta and BC, because if Alberta doesn't get its independence, you can just take a look at BC and the direction they're headed and kind of know your future. But near the end of the interview, we asked her directly about Alberta independence, and I didn't know what to expect because she didn't ask for any of the questions. And it was an amazing answer. I wish I would have asked her earlier. She attached it to, she had a real emotional story with her father working in the oil industry and then working in the Alberta oil industry as well as BC. And it was good to have another voice, knowing that that is supporting Alberta independence outside of Alberta too. Because I think that gives other politicians cover to maybe come out and say, yeah, I support Alberta independence as well.
Dallas is
Yeah.
a wonderful
Yeah.
interview, and yes, that's exactly, she has Alberta roots, and I've even asked her if she would consider coming back to Alberta. Conditions are right, she would open that door.
Yeah.
But I like the outside perspective too because, like Bruce Party, he's in Ontario, he doesn't really have a dog in this race, but he's watching and he's saying, "Hey, you guys, you can help fix the rest of Canada." When people down like Glenn
Beck.
Beck down
Yeah.
in the US says, "Hey, you guys are turning into a socialist crazy place," and this is what we see from our side. It's like, well, listen, pay attention to some of this because he's seeing it from a different angle. But when you're in the fight, like inside the fight, one of the challenges are when anti independence conversations are happening in Toronto and Quebec, and no, actually not so much Quebec, mostly
Mhm.
Toronto and Vancouver, like the premier of BC calling us all traitors. That is disheartening, but it's also helping the argument. And I don't think they realize this because we say, "Hey, look, we're being disrespected." And then the next thing that
Yeah.
happens is a news cycle about how disrespected we are by these people, and it's a fresh wound. It's actually helping the argument. So whether they realize it or not, they are assisting the movement when they do this kind of rhetoric. And then the ones that say, "You guys need to do this because it's going to be best for you and us. We'll be great partners. We can work together," like Saskatchewan's talking,
Yeah.
Northern BC. It all helps. So I encourage people to go ahead and share their opinion, and that's what a free Alberta would encourage. Share your opinion. I don't have to like it, but I'm happy that you're giving it.
Well, we got just a couple more questions. We really appreciate your time and your analysis here. One of the things I wanted to kind of ask is, I know we don't have everything worked out in Alberta independence, but what do you think are some of the firm promises we can make to people about our future vision of Alberta?
Well, there's going to be risk for sure
Yeah.
because there's so much uncertainty, but it's better than the risk that we know that we have. So continue to watch what Mark Carney's doing, talk about New World Order,
Mhm.
going to China, turning his back on the US. We're about to get into some trade negotiations, which I don't think are going to go quite well for Canada. Pay attention to that because the risk that we have right now is on the table. You know
Yeah.
what you're gonna get. It's gonna be bad. So the risk that, of having a new nation and rebuilding without that, I think is offset, and I think it's actually in our favor because, well, we know what not to do. We know what kind of system not to do,
Mhm.
where the elites can take it over, the courts can take it over and run it instead of the people. So let's go ahead and rebuild a new one. So that's one of the promises I can be firm on. It's going to be a better system because we can learn from the mistakes of Canada, US, and other countries. And then the next one is what will happen if we can open up our taps and enter all those markets globally
Yeah.
with our energy? We are being restricted with the Iran war happening down in the Middle East right now. We're all seeing the effects at the gas pumps globally. Well, what if Alberta oil was double or triple in part of the market right now? That would offset it for everybody. And then we'd be a far more prosperous nation as well. I wish Canada would do that. I wish at
Yeah.
this stage Canada would start removing some of our talking points by providing, the ability to go ahead and build those pipelines and open it up and West Coast tankers and let's enter markets. That would be one way to counter this, but that's not in their playbook. If you read the values from Mark Carney, that's not what him and his buddies want to do. But I can promise you that once Alberta independence happens, there's a new government in place and it's by the people, will be far more prosperous. Everything else,
Mhm.
currency, military, pension plan, all these other conversations, they're going to continue to be a conversation
Yeah.
even after the vote, because to properly address those will be everybody has to sit down, all the stakeholders, everybody that's important to that, will have to sit down and have those conversations, especially the First Nations people. and I'm looking forward to their potential future, which could be
Mm,
absolutely free from the
Absolutely.
shackles of Canada. I'm more excited for the First Nations than
yeah.
my other neighbors because they're the ones that have been under the Indian Act and some of these treaties that have not been
Restrictions.
favorable to
Yeah.
them for their entire existence within Canada. I'm looking forward to those shackles being released as well for them.
What he said, absolutely. The prosperity that is in Alberta's hands right now is unbelievable. Just looking at how much money is sent out of the province, if that was retained, what would could we do with it? What would we do with it? Like we have a wish list of things that are currently being restricted right now. So the promise is that things will change for the better. We have to ride some things out, but things will improve.
And what would be your we see a lot of the points and the arguments be based upon economics, for example. But what would be some of the important cultural positive points of an independent Alberta, specifically maybe for women or for people that are looking at the state of, for example, the education system? You mentioned you homeschool, and I'm a huge advocate for homeschooling. So, what would be some of those cultural points that could change someone's mind as well?
First one that come to mind is faith, family,
Yeah.
freedom, and these are values that we hold very dearly here in Alberta. I'm sure some other places have similar variations of that, but faith is foremost for all of us that are fighting really hard on this because we believe that our rights are God given, they're not government
Yeah.
given, and that's part of our culture. Family, we think large families is a great idea. Taking care of your family,
Mhm.
homeschooling is a great idea. Being more involved in your family is part of
Yeah.
our culture as well. And then freedom. Do you want to be a rancher? Do you want to be a farmer? Do you want to be an oiler? Do you want to go out there and create a new business? The freedom to do all of that
Yeah.
without restriction from government or large government is part of our blood. In fact, if you look at most of the immigration to Alberta through the history, it actually came from the South, goes through Texas and Montana. A lot of the immigration came from there. A lot of independently minded people is in the roots of Alberta. That's why it's culturally very different than most of Canada.
Oh,
Me.
Again, same what he said, like, absolutely the exact same. And as a woman, I don't find myself restricted, like, I don't all of a sudden think things are gonna change because one of the key things we have to do is not copy and paste what we're trying to leave from Canada into Alberta. The whole point is that we're trying to, change the template so that, yes, we can guarantee that our healthcare is gonna be better, we can guarantee that our educational system is gonna be better, but work needs to be involved in that. We need to make sure that we look at each line item and make sure we're doing it as best as we possibly can and not just repeating what we were trying to get away from.
And one of the things that we always kind of point back to is when we moved from Ontario to
Mhm.
Alberta in 2021. When we left Ontario, there was a blockade at the
Yeah.
highway entering Ontario. You had to show your papers to get
Yeah.
in. Getting out was a lot easier,
Freedom.
for sure. And then by the time we got to Alberta, it felt so different. It
So
felt like
different.
2019. There were no masks. There were kids in the park. You could go into the grocery store. It felt so different. And that's because I believe a lot of people believed in faith that
Yeah.
they were going to be okay. They wanted their communities and their family. And they also had the freedom to go ahead and enjoy the luxuries of being in Alberta, like going to the parks with your children.
Yeah, I always say that leaving Ontario and coming to Alberta was a literal breath of fresh air because there was no pressure for the masks at the time. And going forward, like, it is truly very different in Alberta. The mindset is so different, and it's relaxing. It is freedom, and that's why I make the joke of we fled Ontario because Ontario at the time was encouraging people to be afraid, encouraging people to not go out, and restrictions on that, and we know the psychological damage it's done to the younger generations, both in and out of the school system. But, Alberta's just fantastic, and we deserve better than what how we're currently being treated by the federal government.
And it's worth fighting
For
for sure.
sure.
Yes, and literally, you said there, we also say we fled Canada under the Trudeau regime because that's literally what happened and what we did. But thank you so much for to both of you for giving us your time and being able to answer some of these questions as well that we had and we've wanted to ask you for a long time personally as well. So it was great to be able to get it on camera. But we always end our interviews and you can answer either together as a couple, individually. But with Liv's one question, which is, what does freedom mean to you?
Go ahead.
I gotta think about that one.
Well, in fairness, I've
Yeah.
been thinking about it ever since your John Bolton interview, and I know that you'd end with that. So I've been thinking about it as well. So a little homework has happened here. So I'll just jump into it. Freedom for me means your ability to take care of yourself, your family, and your community without restriction. There's common sense, like you shouldn't go and steal and you shouldn't
Yeah.
harm. So there's some pretty good common sense. But freedom means the ability to go ahead and plan and plot your future without restriction. And that's where we're fighting on this one. This is why I
Yeah.
think a republic will be very good. I want to live my life that way, and the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them. I think that's important too. You can't have a nanny state that tells you what you can and can't do, because you should be able to learn from your own mistakes as well and grow from that.
Yeah, I think freedom just to be, common sense applies. We all know the do's and don'ts of the world, but just to be with your family. Be with yourself, be with nature, even, but just to be when and not have that restrictions and that pressure over you.
Paul and Jason, thank you so much. And you're very inspiring. So we're really happy to have been able to speak with you again.
Thank you both.
Totally our pleasure. Thanks for having us on.